It won't turn. Why won't you turn?
No. I have nowhere else to go.
You shouldn't have come here.
What is going on? Please, Mom, just listen to me.
You knew I wasn't coming home, didn't you?
Mama, I warned you to get out. It's too late now.
The first sign something was wrong was my key. I slid it into the lock of the mountain cabin my husband had built nearly 30 years ago, but it wouldn't turn. Then I noticed two unfamiliar SUVs parked beside the porch. A moment later, my son Nathan opened the door. He didn't smile. He didn't step aside. "Mom, I changed the locks," he said calmly. "We need to talk about how this place is going to be used from now on." Behind him, strangers were walking through my living room, measuring walls and taking photographs. Then Nathan looked me straight in the eyes and said something I never expected to hear from my own child. "You need to stop thinking of this place as yours alone." Before I tell you what happened next, I'd love to know what you would have done if you were standing where I was. Would you have demanded the key back immediately, or stayed calm and found out what was really happening? Tell me in the comments and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories about family betrayal, boundaries, and second chances speak to you, please like this video and subscribe. It truly helps me keep sharing stories like this with you. For a few seconds after Nathan said those words, I couldn't move. Not because I didn't understand him, because I understood him too well. "You need to stop thinking of this place as yours alone." The sentence followed me all the way down the mountain road that morning, even after I left without stepping inside the cabin. I had owned that land for nearly 30 years. But ownership wasn't what hurt. What hurt was that Nathan knew exactly what that cabin meant to me. My husband Thomas had bought those 14 wooded acres outside Townsend, Tennessee, when Nathan was 13 and Emily was 9. Back then, the land was mostly trees, rocks, and one narrow dirt road that became almost impossible to drive after heavy rain. Thomas loved it immediately. I thought he had lost his mind. "There's nothing here," I told him the first afternoon we walked the property. He smiled and pointed toward the ridge. "That's the point." Thomas worked as a building inspector for Knox County, and he had spent most of his adult life looking at houses other people had built. He always said he wanted to build one place with his own hands before he got too old to climb a ladder. So that became our project. Not a contractor's project, ours. For nearly 4 summers, we drove up every available weekend with lumber strapped to the truck and coolers packed with sandwiches. Thomas framed walls while I measured boards and tried not to complain about mosquitoes. Nathan learned how to swing a hammer without bending every nail. Emily painted window trim and left fingerprints everywhere. The cabin was never fancy. It had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, pine floors, and a stone fireplace. Thomas built himself from rock gathered on the property. The porch faced west. At sunset, the mountains turned blue and purple, layer after layer, disappearing into the distance. Thomas used to sit there with coffee and say, "People spend their whole lives chasing peace, Brianna. Sometimes peace is just knowing where to sit." After he died, those words became almost unbearable. Thomas had pancreatic cancer. By the time doctors found it, we had less than a year. The final months of his life were filled with appointments, medications, paperwork, and the strange exhaustion that comes from trying to act normal when you know nothing will ever be normal again. 5 years had passed since then. I still lived in the same modest house outside Knoxville, but the cabin became the place where I could breathe. At home, grief felt crowded. Every room held some reminder of what I had lost. At the cabin, grief felt different, quieter. I could sit on the porch, hear the wind move through the trees, and remember Thomas without feeling crushed by the fact that he was gone. That was why I kept it. Not because I was wealthy, not because I planned to sell it, not because I wanted to keep something from my children. Nathan and Emily had always been welcome there. I had told them that many times. "If you want the cabin, just ask me first." Emily usually did. She lived in Nashville with her husband and rarely came up more than twice a year. Nathan came more often. He had always loved the mountains even as a boy. Maybe that was why I had never questioned his attachment to the property. Nathan was 42 now. He had started Ridgeline Retreats 3 years earlier after leaving a sales position with an outdoor equipment company. At first, I had been proud of him. The business organized hiking weekends, corporate retreats, guided excursions, and short outdoor experiences for people who wanted the mountains without having to plan everything themselves. Nathan was good with people. He could walk into a room full of strangers and leave knowing everyone's first name. Thomas used to say Nathan could sell ice to a man standing in a snowstorm. For a while, the business seemed to do well. Nathan talked about partnerships with hotels, new tour packages, and expanding into luxury experiences. I listened because he was my son. But I never asked too many questions. I had learned years earlier that Nathan heard questions as criticism. 2 weeks before he changed the locks, he had called me on a Wednesday evening. "Mom, any chance Melissa and I could use the cabin next weekend?" There was nothing unusual in the question. "Of course," I said. "Just the two of you." There was a pause. "Probably. I may have a couple friends stop by." I didn't think much of it. Then he started asking questions. "Do you still have the original septic records?" "I think so." "What kind of well pump is up there?" "I don't know, Nathan. Your father handled that." "Do you know how many gallons the septic tank holds?" I laughed. Why on earth would I know that? He laughed too, but it sounded forced. Just curious. Then he asked about the insurance. Was the cabin insured separately from the land? Did I have liability coverage? Had the county ever reassessed the property? What were the annual taxes? At the time, I assumed he was worried about maintenance. Nathan had become more interested in practical matters after Thomas died. At least that was what I told myself. Now, sitting alone at my kitchen table after returning from the mountain, those questions sounded completely different. I opened a drawer and found the notebook where I kept property information, tax receipts, insurance statements, a handwritten list of repairs Thomas had wanted done before he became ill. I stared at those papers and replayed Nathan's phone call. Then another memory surfaced. 3 months earlier, Nathan had asked whether the cabin's internet connection could support several laptops at once. I had answered without thinking. A month after that, he asked whether the road was privately maintained. Then he wanted to know if the spring at the lower edge of the property still ran year-round. Each question had seemed small by itself. Together they formed something I did not yet understand. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Nathan. I almost didn't answer. Finally, I picked up. "Mom." His voice was softer now. "We should talk when everybody's calmer." "Everybody." "You were upset." "I found strangers in my cabin after my key stopped working." He sighed. "I told you. I upgraded the locks. Without asking me. It needed to be done." "For what?" Silence. That silence frightened me more than his anger would have. "Nathan, what exactly are you doing up there?" "I'm trying to improve something that's been sitting unused." The words landed like an insult. Unused. He had no idea how many mornings I had watched the sun rise from that porch. How many times I had taken Thomas's old flannel shirt from the closet and held it because it still smelled faintly like cedar. How often I had gone there because it was the one place where I still felt married instead of widowed. "That cabin is not unused," I said. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did." Another pause. Then his voice became colder. "Mom, we'll talk later." He hung up. I remained at the kitchen table long after the call ended. Outside, late afternoon sunlight stretched across the yard. I looked at the property notebook again. Septic capacity, insurance, taxes, road maintenance, water, internet. None of those were questions a man needed answered for a weekend getaway. And for the first time, I understood something I should have seen weeks earlier. Nathan had not borrowed my cabin for a weekend. He had been studying it. The next morning, I drove back to the cabin. This time, I was not going there as a grieving widow looking for peace. I was going there as the owner. I had barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw strangers moving through my living room. I saw Nathan standing in the doorway, blocking me from entering a place where I had spent almost 30 years making memories. But more than anything, I kept hearing one word: unused. By 8:30, I was climbing the narrow mountain road again. The two unfamiliar SUVs were still there. So was Nathan's truck. And now there was another vehicle parked beside the barn, a dark gray sedan with temporary dealer plates. I pulled in behind it and shut off the engine. For a moment, I sat with both hands on the steering wheel. Thomas had always told me that anger made people careless. Know what you want before you open your mouth, he used to say. I knew what I wanted. My key, my cabin, and every stranger off my property. I walked to the porch and knocked. That alone made my stomach turn. I was knocking on my own door. Nathan answered almost immediately. His expression tightened when he saw me. Mom, I want the new key. He glanced behind him. This isn't a good time. I'm not asking whether it's a good time. His jaw moved slightly. You're doing this in front of people. You changed my locks in front of people. That stopped him for a second. Then Melissa appeared behind his shoulder. She wore dark jeans, ankle boots, and the polite expression she used when she wanted to make an argument sound like a favor. Brianna, can we please talk about this calmly? I am calm. I looked past them. A man and a woman stood near the fireplace. The man held a tablet. The woman was studying the ceiling beams. Neither of them looked like weekend guests. Who are they? Nathan stepped onto the porch and partially closed the door behind him. Potential business partners. I stared at him. For what business? He rubbed the back of his neck. Ridgeline. At my cabin. Can you lower your voice? No. He looked toward the window. Then he said, come inside. I almost laughed. He was inviting me into my own house. Still, I followed him. The moment I stepped through the doorway, I knew the situation was worse than I had imagined. The living room looked different. Not renovated exactly, staged. The old patchwork quilt Thomas's mother had made was gone from the back of the sofa. In its place were two matching cream-colored throws. The family photographs that had sat on the mantel for years had disappeared. The framed picture of Thomas holding Nathan at age 14 was gone. So was the photograph of Emily painting the porch railing with yellow paint on her nose. The mantel now held 3 ceramic vases and a stack of expensive-looking travel books. A new coffee station occupied one corner of the kitchen. Not a normal coffee maker. A commercial-looking espresso machine. Rows of white cups flavored syrups, and small bags of locally roasted coffee arranged beneath a wooden sign. I turned slowly. What did you do? Melissa stepped forward. We made a few improvements. Where are my photographs? They're safe. Where we packed them carefully. I stared at her. She gave me a small smile. We thought the place could use a more updated look. Nathan exhaled. Mom, please. No, I want to hear this. The man near the fireplace cleared his throat awkwardly. Nathan glanced toward him. Give us a minute. The man nodded and walked with the woman toward the kitchen. That was when I noticed the baskets. 3 wicker baskets sat on the counter. Each contained bottled water, gourmet crackers, chocolate trail maps, and small jars of honey. A printed card was tied to each basket with green ribbon. I stepped closer. At the top was a logo. Ridgeline Retreats. Beneath it were the words, Welcome to your Smoky Mountain escape. My hands went cold. I picked up one of the cards. What is this? Nathan said nothing. I turned. What is this? Melissa answered first. It's part of the guest experience. The guest experience, Nathan finally spoke. We're testing a concept. I looked from him to Melissa. At my cabin, it's a pilot property. I actually thought I had misheard him. Oh, what a pilot property, he repeated, for Ridgeline. I put the card down. No, Mom, no. You don't even know what I'm proposing. I don't need to. Nathan's face reddened. This is exactly why I didn't tell you everything up front. The sentence hit me hard. Not because he had admitted hiding something. Because he said it as though secrecy had been necessary because of me. I looked around again. There were fresh linens visible through the open bedroom door. A professional camera case sat beside the dining table. On the table itself was a thick black binder. I walked toward it. Nathan moved quickly. Mom. I reached it before he did. On the cover, printed in white letters, were the words, Ridgeline Smoky Mountain Cabin. I opened it. The first page showed a professional photograph of my porch at sunset. The next page contained descriptions of amenities. Private mountain setting, stone fireplace, authentic Appalachian character, high-speed internet, access to exclusive guided experiences. I kept turning pages. Pricing, cleaning schedules, check-in procedures, suggested weekend packages. Then I found a page labeled upcoming reservations. My heart began pounding. There were names, dates, 6 weekends, possibly more on the next page. I looked at Nathan. You rented out my cabin. His expression changed from defensive to impatient. I accepted some preliminary bookings. Without asking me, we were going to discuss it. You were going to discuss it after you took reservations. They're refundable. That is not the point. It's absolutely the point. Nobody's trapped. I'm trapped. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means you changed the locks on my cabin, removed my personal things, brought strangers into it, advertised it, and took reservations. And somehow you're standing there acting like I'm being unreasonable. Melissa folded her arms. Brianna, this could be good for everyone. I did not ask for it to be good for everyone. Nathan stepped closer. This place has potential. It already has a purpose. For you to come up here twice a month and sit on the porch? There was silence. Melissa looked at him. Even she seemed to know he had gone too far. But Nathan continued. You're not using it the way it could be used. I felt something inside me crack. Not loudly, quietly. The kind of break that changes how you see someone. You weren't doing anything with the place anyway, he said. For one terrible second, I saw him as a boy again. Nathan at 8 asleep under a blanket beside the fireplace. Nathan at 16 carrying firewood with Thomas. Nathan at 25 bringing Melissa there for the first time. Then that boy disappeared. Standing in front of me was a 42-year-old man who had looked at a place filled with my marriage, my grief and my memories, and seen wasted earning potential. I closed the binder. Cancel every reservation. Nathan shook his head. I can't do that. You can and you will. There are commitments, not mine. His expression hardened. You keep saying that like you're the only person with rights here. I froze. What does that mean? He looked at Melissa. She said nothing. Nathan walked to a small desk near the window and opened the drawer. He removed a folder. I didn't want to get into this today. He placed it on the table between us. Inside was a photocopied legal document. At the bottom of the first page, I saw a signature. Mine. Nathan tapped the paper with one finger. You signed this years ago. I stared at my own handwriting. My name, Brianna Ross. For the first time since arriving, anger gave way to something colder. Fear. Nathan looked directly at me. So before you start ordering everyone off the property, Mom, maybe you should remember what you already agreed to. For several seconds, I could only stare at my signature. It was mine. There was no question about that. The slant of the B, the way I looped the second R in Ross. Even the slight upward stroke at the end was exactly how I had signed my name for most of my adult life. My stomach tightened. Nathan must have seen the uncertainty on my face because his posture changed. Not much. Just enough. His shoulders relaxed. That frightened me. He had been waiting for that reaction. I told you, he said. This isn't as simple as you think. I looked down at the document again. The heading read, Family Property Maintenance and Management Agreement. The words stirred something in my memory, but only faintly. How did you get this? Nathan folded his arms. It was in Dad's old files. Which files? The ones you gave me after he died. I gave you boxes of receipts and business papers. This was with them. I kept reading. The document was dated nearly 6 years earlier. That placed it during the final months of Thomas's illness. Immediately, memories came rushing back. Hospital waiting rooms. Prescription bottles lined up on the kitchen counter. Insurance calls. Specialists. Legal documents spread across our dining table, while Thomas sat wrapped in a blanket because chemotherapy made him cold, even in July. I remembered signing things. Too many things. Medical directives, insurance authorizations, estate documents. A temporary power arrangement, so Nathan could deal with contractors at the cabin when Thomas became too weak to travel. At the time, I had barely slept. Every piece of paper had felt secondary to one desperate thought: keep Thomas alive. I swallowed. What exactly do you think this gives you? Nathan pointed toward a paragraph in the middle. Read it. The language was dense. The designated family manager shall have authority to coordinate, supervise, maintain, preserve, and administer the cabin structure and associated improvements as reasonably necessary for continued use and upkeep. I read it twice, then a third time. My eyes stopped on one word: administer. Nathan tapped it. That's what I'm talking about. Administer does not mean own. I didn't say it did. You changed my locks. For management. You took reservations. For use. You removed my belongings. They're stored safely. I stared at him. So you think this piece of paper lets you take over my cabin? I think it gives me more authority than you're pretending. I'm not pretending anything. Melissa stepped closer. Her voice was softer than Nathan's, but somehow that made her words sting more. Brianna, maybe you just don't remember the agreement clearly. I turned to her. I remember my husband dying. Her face shifted. That's not what I meant. No, because that was what my life looked like when I signed this. She lowered her voice. I'm only saying that sometimes memory gets mixed with emotion. There it was. A small sentence. Calm, polite, almost concerned. And yet I felt something cold move through me. Memory gets mixed with emotion. I looked at Nathan. He did not correct her. He did not say, "Don't talk to my mother like that." Instead, he glanced at the document. Mom, nobody's saying you're confused. That is exactly what she just said. Melissa sighed. You're making this personal. It is personal. You're standing inside my cabin. Nathan rubbed his forehead. This is going nowhere. No. It's finally going somewhere. I reached into my purse for my phone. Nathan immediately stiffened. What are you doing? Taking pictures. Why? Because I want a copy. I can send it to you. I'll take my own. I photographed every page. Nathan watched me carefully. There were 6 pages altogether. I made sure I captured the date signatures notary section and every paragraph. Then I photographed the binder, the welcome baskets, the new coffee station, the missing family photographs. Finally, I turned toward the door. Nathan looked surprised. You're leaving for now. Mom, we should finish talking. No. You came all the way back up here, and I learned what I needed to learn. His expression tightened again. What does that mean? It means I'm not discussing a legal document while standing in a room full of people who apparently already decided what it means. Nathan followed me onto the porch. Melissa stayed inside. Mom. I kept walking. He came down the steps behind me. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be. I turned. The mountain air smelled of pine and damp earth. For a brief second, the ordinary beauty of the place made the situation feel even more unreal. You changed the locks on property I own, Nathan. The cabin isn't that straightforward. So you keep saying, you signed an agreement. Then someone who actually understands that agreement can explain it to me. His jaw hardened. You're going to call a lawyer? Yes. He gave a short laugh. That laugh did more to frighten me than anything else. Of course you are. What is that supposed to mean? It means instead of talking to your own son, you're going to turn this into some legal war. I stared at him. You changed my locks before you talked to me. He looked away. For the first time, I saw something beneath his confidence. Not guilt. Nervousness. It vanished quickly. Just don't do anything stupid because you're upset. I felt my anger rise again, but I refused to give him what he seemed to expect. I walked to my car. Behind me, Nathan called out, "We can talk after you calm down." My hand stopped on the door handle. I almost turned around. Almost shouted. Instead, I got into the car and drove away. The road down from the cabin twisted through thick trees. Usually I loved that drive. That morning I barely saw it. All I could think about was my signature. Had I really given Nathan authority I had forgotten about? Had Thomas and I made some arrangement I no longer remembered? The possibility made me feel ashamed in a way I hated admitting. I had always trusted my memory. At 68, I misplaced reading glasses sometimes. I walked into rooms and forgot why. I once spent 20 minutes looking for my phone while talking on it. Normal things. But Melissa's words had planted something ugly in my mind. Maybe you just don't remember. By the time I reached the highway, I had started questioning myself. Then I remembered Nathan's face when I first read the document. That tiny shift, the relief. He had not looked like a man confidently presenting a clear legal right. He had looked like a man watching to see whether I would doubt myself. That thought changed everything. At a red light, I pulled into the parking lot of a small grocery store and stopped the car. I opened the photographs again. This time I did not focus on my signature. I focused on Nathan's behavior. He had taken the cabin before showing me the document, changed the locks before explaining his interpretation, accepted reservations before asking whether I agreed. And when I challenged him, he had not said, "You gave me ownership." He had said I should remember what I agreed to. Those were not the same thing. I sat there with the engine running and realized what truly frightened me. Nathan had built his entire position around one assumption. Not that the document was unquestionably on his side, that I would be too uncertain to challenge him. I called the attorney who had handled Thomas's estate. When the receptionist answered, I said, "My name is Brianna Ross. I need an appointment with Helen Ward as soon as possible." She asked what it concerned. I looked at the photograph of my signature. "Property," I said. Then I added, "and something my son thinks I forgot." I did not wait for Helen's appointment before I started looking. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe fear. Or maybe I had finally reached the point where sitting quietly felt more dangerous than knowing the truth. When I got home, I made coffee. I did not want opened my laptop and typed the name of Nathan's company into the search bar. Ridgeline Retreats. I had visited the website before. Months earlier, Nathan had proudly shown me photographs of guided hikes, couples standing beside waterfalls, and smiling groups gathered around outdoor fire pits. Back then, the business had seemed harmless. Now I looked at everything differently. The homepage had changed. A large photograph filled the screen. My cabin. I recognized it instantly. The western porch. The stone chimney Thomas had rebuilt twice because he hated the first version. The two old maple trees near the driveway. But the photograph had been edited to look brighter, warmer, more luxurious. Across the image were the words, "Coming soon, the Ross Ridge House, an exclusive private mountain estate." For a moment I simply stared. Ross Ridge House. Not Brianna's cabin. Not a family property. Not even a partner location. Nathan had turned our family name into a brand. I clicked. A full page opened. There were professional photographs of every room. The bedroom where Thomas had slept during his final Christmas at the cabin. The kitchen table where Emily had done her homework when she was 12. The fireplace where Nathan once burned his sleeve trying to roast a marshmallow. All of it was displayed like merchandise. The description made my skin crawl. Experience authentic mountain privacy with curated luxury in a family-owned flagship retreat overlooking the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains. Family-owned. Technically, I suppose that word could mean almost anything. But the next paragraph was worse. The first property in Ridgeline Retreats' planned network of exclusive mountain destinations. First property, planned network. I scrolled lower. There was a reservation calendar. Nearly every weekend for the next 2 months showed unavailable. I clicked on one available date. The price was $685 per night. I blinked and looked again. $685. There was a cleaning fee, a concierge fee, an optional private hiking package, a premium arrival experience. Nathan had not merely rented the cabin a few times. He had built an entire product around it. I found a section labeled Future Vision. That was when my anger became something colder. There was an illustrated site concept, not official architectural plans, but polished enough to look serious. 3 additional cabins, an event pavilion, a sauna building, a landscaped fire circle, a parking area large enough for at least 15 cars. and a network of trails running through the woods Thomas and I had spent decades protecting. I leaned closer to the screen. One proposed trail crossed the lower meadow. Another ran directly beside the spring. My spring. Thomas used to kneel there every April to clear leaves from the water channel. He said the spring was the heartbeat of the land. Nathan had turned it into a dotted line on a marketing diagram. I took screenshots of everything: the listing, the prices, the reservation calendar, the expansion concept. Then I found a downloadable brochure. On page 4 was a sentence that made me sit back. Ridgeline Retreats is developing its first owned destination property in East Tennessee. Owned. I read it again. Not managed, not partnered, owned. My hands started shaking. I called Nathan. He did not answer. I called again. Nothing. So I called Emily. My daughter answered on the third ring. "Mom, are you busy? I'm between meetings. What's wrong?" I almost said nothing. Emily had always hated conflict between Nathan and me. She tended to smooth things over, especially after Thomas died. But this was no longer a disagreement. "Did Nathan ever talk to you about the cabin?" There was a pause. "What do you mean, did he ever say anything about taking it over?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Mom, what happened?" I closed my eyes. "He changed the locks. What he changed the locks, removed my personal things, brought investors up there and started renting it through Ridgeline." Emily said nothing. I continued. "He says an old management agreement gives him authority. Wait, he's renting Dad's cabin." "Yes, that doesn't make sense. He has a website." I sent her the link. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Then I heard her inhale sharply. "Oh my God, you didn't know, no." But something in her voice changed. "Emily, what you know something." "No, please don't protect him. I'm not protecting him." "Then tell me." She exhaled. "A few months ago, Nathan asked me something." My stomach tightened. "What?" "He asked whether I would care if he eventually took over Dad's mountain place." Eventually. The word bothered me immediately. "What did you say?" "I told him I didn't care as long as you were okay with it." "And what did he say?" "He said you two had been talking." I closed my eyes. "We had not." Emily went quiet. "I thought you had." "No." He made it sound like it was basically decided. I stared at Nathan's website again. "When was this? Maybe 4 months ago." 4 months. Nathan had asked to borrow the cabin 2 weeks ago, but he had been discussing taking it over months earlier. Did he say why? He mentioned Ridgeline expanding. Anything else? Emily hesitated. He asked if I would ever challenge him over the property after you were gone. That sentence landed hard. After you were gone. I gripped the edge of the table. What exactly did he say? He said something like, "If Mom lets me develop it now, are you going to make trouble later because technically it's family property?" "And you still thought I knew?" "Yes. Because he said you were tired of maintaining it." I laughed once. There was no humor in it. "I pay someone to mow twice a month. That is apparently exhaustion now." "Mom, I'm sorry. This is not your fault. I should have called you. You trusted your brother. So did you." That hurt because it was true. After we hung up, I remained at the table. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I pulled up the brochure again and studied the photographs. Something else caught my attention. One picture showed Nathan standing on the porch beside 2 men in business jackets. The caption read, "Founder, Nathan Ross, presenting the flagship property to strategic partners." The photograph had been uploaded 7 weeks earlier. 7 weeks! Long before he asked for the weekend. I zoomed in. Nathan was smiling. One hand rested on the porch railing Thomas had built. The other held a folder. Behind him was the cabin. My cabin. 7 weeks earlier, he had already been presenting it to potential business partners. That meant the questions about the septic system, the taxes, the insurance, the well, the road, and the internet had not been casual curiosity. They were due diligence. Nathan had not arrived at the cabin one Friday and suddenly seen an opportunity. He had been building his plan for months. And somewhere along the way, he had apparently decided that my permission was not something he needed before he began. My phone rang. For one hopeful second I thought it might be Nathan. It was not. The screen showed a local number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it. Instead I answered. Brianna Ross. Yes, my name is Daniel Price. I'm calling regarding Ridgeline Retreats. I sat straighter. What about it? There was a brief pause. I'm trying to verify some information connected to a commercial financing request. I looked again at the words on Nathan's brochure. Owned destination property. A cold feeling spread through my chest. What information? The mountain property outside Townsend. I said nothing. Then Daniel asked a question that changed the entire situation. Mrs. Ross, are you aware that your property has been represented as part of Ridgeline Retreats expansion plan? I did not answer Daniel Price immediately. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of my refrigerator and the pounding of my own heart. Mrs. Ross, he asked again. Yes, I'm here. Are you aware that the property outside Townsend has been included in materials connected to Ridgeline Retreats expansion? I looked at the website still open on my laptop. I became aware of that today. There was a pause. Then his voice became more careful. I understand. What exactly has my son told you? I'm limited in what I can discuss regarding a client's financing application. Then why are you calling me? Because your name appears in connection with the underlying property records, and we need clarification before proceeding. That one sentence told me more than he probably intended. Nathan had gone far enough into a financing process that someone had started checking county records. Did Nathan tell you he owns the property? Daniel paused again. I can't characterize his statements. That sounds like a yes. I didn't say that. No, you didn't. I took a breath. Then let me make one thing clear. I have not sold my land to my son. I have not transferred it to his company. And I have not signed any agreement allowing Ridgeline Retreats to develop it. The silence on the other end lasted long enough to make me nervous. Thank you, Daniel finally said. That is important information. What happens now? I would strongly recommend that you speak with your attorney. I already have an appointment. That would be wise. Before we ended the call, I asked one more question. Mr. Price, should I be worried? He chose his words carefully. I think you should understand exactly what documents exist and exactly what rights each party has. It was not an answer, but it was enough. Helen Ward's office called me less than an hour later. They had a cancellation the next morning. I accepted immediately. Helen had known Thomas and me for almost 20 years. She had handled our wills, Thomas's estate documents, and several property matters over the years. When I walked into her office carrying printed screenshots, photographs, and the old agreement Nathan had shown me, I felt embarrassed. That surprised me. I had done nothing wrong. Still, part of me felt foolish for not knowing what I had signed 6 years earlier. Helen noticed. You look like you're preparing to confess to a crime, she said. I gave a tired laugh. Maybe I signed away my cabin and forgot about it. That would be a very unusual crime. I handed her the document. My son says this gives him authority. Helen adjusted her glasses and began reading. Unlike Nathan, she did not rush to the paragraph in the middle. She read from the top. Every page, every footnote, every signature. Then she turned back to page 1 and read it again. I sat across from her desk, watching her expression. Finally, she said, "Your signature is genuine." My stomach dropped slightly. I know, and this document is valid. That made it drop farther. So he's right, I didn't say that. She tapped the title. This is a maintenance and management agreement. It was created when Thomas became too ill to handle physical matters at the cabin. I remember some of that. You and Thomas wanted Nathan to be able to authorize emergency repairs, meet contractors, arrange maintenance, and preserve the property if neither of you could travel. She turned the page. This paragraph is the one Nathan is relying on. The designated family manager shall have authority to coordinate, supervise, maintain, preserve, and administer the cabin structure and associated improvements as reasonably necessary for continued use and upkeep. Helen looked at me. Administer does not mean commercially exploit. Relief came so quickly that I almost felt dizzy. So he cannot rent it. Not under this agreement. Can he change the locks? He could arguably replace damaged locks as maintenance. He cannot use that authority to exclude you. I leaned back. For the first time since Monday morning, I felt as though solid ground had returned beneath my feet. Then Helen frowned. What? She reread the paragraph. Something is unusual. There went my solid ground. What this agreement distinguishes between the cabin structure and the land several times. I don't understand. Normally, for a simple family maintenance agreement, we would refer to the property as a whole. Here, the language repeatedly separates cabin structure and associated improvements from underlying real property. She flipped to another page. See this? I leaned closer. Nothing in this agreement shall be construed as transferring title to encumbering or granting possessory interest in the underlying real property. I read it twice. That sounds good for me. It is. Then why are you worried? I'm not worried. I'm curious. She turned to her computer. Do you remember Thomas doing any estate planning specifically involving the cabin? We did a lot of planning when he got sick. Before that, I thought, maybe. He worried about property taxes and what would happen after we died. Anything about separating the cabin from the acreage number. Helen began searching through electronic files. After several minutes, she found something. Here. She rotated the monitor toward me. A document index appeared on the screen. About 12 years ago, Thomas asked my former partner to review an ownership structure involving improvements on the mountain parcel. 12 years. Yes. Nathan would have been 30 then. What kind of structure? I don't have the complete file digitally. Why not? It was handled before we converted everything to the current system. She leaned back. There is a reference to a memorandum regarding conditional future interests in the cabin improvements. The words sounded like another language. Can you translate that into English? Helen smiled slightly. It may mean Thomas arranged for someone other than you to have a future interest in the physical cabin under certain conditions. Nathan possibly. Or both children. I stared at her. Could Nathan actually own the cabin? Today I doubt it. But eventually, possibly. My relief became confusion. Helen reached for Nathan's agreement again. This may be why the language is so specific. I felt a headache beginning behind my eyes. So Nathan found one document and decided it means more than it does. That is one possibility. What is the other? That he found something else. I looked at her. Something I haven't seen exactly. The thought made me uneasy. Nathan had been too confident. Maybe he was wrong. But maybe his confidence had come from another document he had not shown me. Helen looked through the old index again. We need the original property packet. Wouldn't you have it? Some of it. But Thomas kept originals himself. That triggered a memory. A blue metal box. Thomas sitting at the dining table sorting papers. Then another memory surfaced. The bank. Helen looked up. What? We had a safe deposit box. You still do. I haven't opened it since Thomas died. What did he keep there? Deeds, insurance papers, bonds, maybe old estate documents. Helen nodded slowly. That's where we go next. I gathered my papers. Before I left, she stopped me. Brianna, yes, do not confront Nathan about what we discussed. Why? Because right now we know what he showed you. She held up the agreement. But we don't know what he believes he found. I understood. If Nathan thought he had some hidden legal advantage, arguing with him now might only make him more defensive. Helen continued. And until we see the full property file, I don't want either of us making assumptions. I nodded. But on the drive home, one question would not leave me alone. Why had Thomas gone to the trouble of separating the cabin from the land 12 years earlier? Thomas never did complicated things without a reason. That night I searched through an old desk in my bedroom until I found the safe deposit box key taped inside a small envelope. Thomas's handwriting was on the front. Mountain property. I stood there holding it for a long time. Then I turned the envelope over. On the back, in smaller handwriting, he had written 4 words. Brianna must read first. The words on the envelope kept me awake that night. Brianna must read first. Thomas had written them in blue ink, the same careful block letters he used whenever something mattered enough that he did not want it misunderstood. I sat on the edge of my bed holding the safe deposit key in one hand and the envelope in the other. Part of me wanted to call Helen immediately. Another part of me wanted to drive to Nathan's house and demand every document he had ever taken from his father's files. I did neither. Helen had told me not to confront him until we understood the full picture. So the next morning, I focused on the one thing I already knew for certain. Nathan was trying to turn my mountain property into part of his business, and somewhere a lender was asking questions. At 9:15, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the same local number from the day before. Daniel Price, I answered. Mrs. Ross. Yes, I wanted to follow up on our conversation. I sat at my kitchen table. What happened? I reviewed the information we have on file, and I need to verify one point with you. I'll answer whatever I legally can. His tone softened slightly. I appreciate that. There was a pause, and then he asked, have you signed any current lease easement development agreement or commercial use authorization involving ridgeline retreats? Number nothing. Granting your son access rights for business purposes. Number nothing, allowing him to pledge the property or expected rights in the property as part of a financing package? I straightened. Expected rights. Daniel hesitated. That is how certain materials appear to have been described. What materials? I need to be careful here. I understand you can't give me confidential loan details, but my land is being discussed. I need to know why. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the financing request involves a proposed expansion of ridgeline retreats. I waited. The proposal includes improvements connected to the Townsend location. How much money? I can't disclose the exact requested amount. Is it small? Another pause. No. That one word told me enough. This was not a $20,000 business loan to buy hiking equipment. Nathan had built something much larger around my property. Daniel continued. The lender's concern is not simply the cabin. Then what is it control? I looked toward the back window, though I was no longer seeing my yard. What kind of control? Access, parking, utility capacity, development rights, long-term commercial use. Every question Nathan had asked me suddenly returned. The road, the septic system, the well, the property taxes, insurance. He had not been asking about the cabin. He had been asking about infrastructure. Daniel said, the proposed project cannot function if the business does not have reliable control over the surrounding real estate. And Nathan told you he did. I'm not going to characterize his statements. But he gave you something that made you think he might. Daniel did not answer directly. Instead, he said, the file included representations that family property arrangements were already substantially in place. Substantially in place. I almost laughed. I had learned about the business plan only because my own key stopped working. Mr. Price, no family property arrangement is substantially in place. I understand that now. What happens to the loan? The review is being paused. I gripped the edge of the table. Because of me, because a material ownership issue needs clarification. There it was. Material. That meant serious. Nathan knows you called me. I cannot discuss internal communications. The answer was polite, but I suspected that meant yes. When we ended the call, I sat motionless for several minutes. Then my phone rang again. This time it was Nathan. Of course it was. I stared at his name until the fourth ring. Then I answered. What did you tell the bank? No hello, no mom. What did they ask? Don't play games. I'm not. You told them I don't have authority over the property. I told them the truth. You don't even understand the documents. Neither do you, apparently. His voice sharpened. You're jeopardizing months of work. That sentence confirmed everything Daniel had been too professional to say. Months, not weeks. Then maybe you should have spoken to me months ago. I was going to. When the structure was ready. What structure? Silence. Nathan. This is exactly why I didn't tell you early. I felt my chest tighten. Because I might have said no. Because you get emotional about the cabin. There was that word again. Emotional. As if sentiment disqualified me from ownership. As if his ambition mattered more because he could put numbers beside it. You mean I might have had an opinion about what happens on my land? Mom, the business needs certainty. So you created certainty without me. I created momentum. No. You created a story. He exhaled sharply. You have no idea what's at stake. Then tell me. Another silence. I could hear him moving, maybe pacing. Finally, he said, "There are investors involved. I know. How I've seen your website. That doesn't tell you anything. It tells me you're advertising my cabin as your flagship property. I never said it was personally mine. You called it an owned destination. That's marketing language." I closed my eyes. "Marketing language does not change a deed." His voice dropped. "You need to stop talking to people until we sort this out." That made me open my eyes again. "Excuse me, the lender. Anyone else who calls, just send them to me." "No, Mom. No, Nathan. You're going to kill this deal. You built a deal around land you do not control." His answer came immediately. "That's not entirely true." The confidence in his voice returned. The same confidence I had seen when he placed that old agreement in front of me. I remembered Helen's warning. We don't know what he believes he found, so I did not argue. Instead, I said, "Then I suppose we'll find out." He went quiet. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm getting advice." "You talked to Helen." I said nothing. That was answer enough. His voice changed. For the first time, I heard real alarm. "Mom, you don't need to turn Dad's estate into a weapon." My heart tightened. "I'm not turning anything into anything. This was supposed to help the family." Then why was the family the last to know? He had no answer. After the call, I drove to Helen's office with the safe deposit key. She was waiting for me. I spoke with the lender, I told her. Her eyebrows lifted. "And the loan is paused." That quickly, they discovered Nathan doesn't control the land. Helen leaned back. "Then the land is essential." "Yes." I told her about the access road, parking utilities, and development rights. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "That explains why Nathan is so focused on the distinction between the cabin and the property. How if he believes he has some future right to the cabin, he may think that is enough to persuade investors. But it isn't." "No." She folded her hands. "A cabin without legal access, water rights, septic approval, parking rights, or commercial use permission is not much of a business asset." I thought of Nathan standing in the doorway telling me I needed to stop thinking of the place as mine alone. Now I finally understood the strategy. The changed locks, the staged rooms, the investors, the reservations, possession. He wanted the cabin to look operational, controlled, already his. And perhaps he believed that if the business grew enough around it, I would eventually have no choice but to agree. Helen stood. "Let's go to the bank." The safe deposit box was brought to us in a small private room. I inserted the key. Helen used the bank's second key. The lid opened. Inside were deeds, insurance papers, old certificates, and several sealed envelopes. Near the bottom lay a thick blue envelope. My name was written across the front. Underneath it, in Thomas's handwriting, were the words, "For the mountain property. Do not let anyone explain this to you before you read it yourself." I touched the envelope but did not open it immediately. Helen looked at me. Ready. I thought about Nathan, about the loan, about the strangers in my living room. Then I thought about Thomas carefully arranging these papers years before any of this happened. "Yes," I said, and I broke the seal. The first thing I saw inside the blue envelope was not a deed. It was a letter. Thomas had folded it in half and written my name on the outside in the same careful handwriting I had recognized on the envelope. Brianna, just that. For a moment I could not open it. I ran my thumb along the crease and remembered how his hands had looked during the last year of his life. Strong hands once, builder's hands, hands that could lift a beam into place and fix almost anything around the house. By the end, they had become thinner. Still steady, though. Thomas had remained careful even when his body was failing him. Helen sat quietly across from me. She did not hurry me. Finally, I unfolded the letter. "Brianna, if you are reading this because there is confusion about the mountain property, I want you to understand one thing before anyone else tells you what these documents mean. The land is yours." I stopped reading. My eyes filled immediately. Helen lowered her gaze, giving me privacy, even though we were sitting only 3 feet apart. I took a breath and continued. Thomas explained that 12 years earlier, long before his illness, he had become worried about how the mountain property would eventually pass to our children. Not because he wanted to keep it from them, because he wanted to protect it from being used carelessly. He had seen Nathan make financial decisions that frightened him. Nathan had been 30 then. That was the year his first business failed. He had started a landscaping company with a friend, financed 2 trucks, leased equipment, hired people too quickly, and assumed summer contracts would cover everything. When the contracts did not come, Nathan borrowed more. Then he came to us. Thomas and I had helped. At the time, I told myself that everyone made mistakes in their 30s. Thomas had agreed to help too, but afterward he became quieter whenever Nathan talked about money. I remembered one argument between them. Nathan had wanted Thomas to co-sign a new loan. Thomas refused. Nathan accused him of not believing in him. Later that night, Thomas said something I had forgotten until I read his letter. Nathan thinks confidence can replace permission. I had defended our son. He's ambitious. Thomas had looked at me. Ambition isn't the problem. Assuming other people will carry the risk is. I had thought he was being too hard on Nathan. Now sitting inside that bank, I realized Thomas had been thinking much farther ahead than I had. Helen reached into the envelope and removed several documents. "This is the memorandum I saw referenced in the old file index," she said. She began reading. The legal language was complicated, but Helen translated it carefully. The 14 acres had remained titled to Thomas and me jointly at first. After Thomas's death, full ownership of the land passed to me. That part was straightforward. The unusual part concerned the cabin itself. Thomas had created a conditional future interest in the physical structure and certain improvements. After my death, assuming specific conditions were satisfied, Nathan and Emily could inherit interests connected with the cabin. Not the land automatically, not the access road, not the spring, not the development rights. The cabin. I frowned. How can someone own a building and not the ground under it? "It happens," Helen said. "It's not common in ordinary family properties, but structures and land rights can be treated separately under certain arrangements. So Nathan may eventually have rights to the cabin potentially, but not now." I looked at the papers, and even later, he wouldn't automatically own these 14 acres. Correct. Helen pulled another document forward. "This is more important for your current situation." The page contained several restrictive provisions. Helen read them slowly. During Brianna Ross's lifetime, no commercial use subdivision construction development expanded occupancy leasing program or material alteration of the mountain parcel could occur without my explicit written consent. Not verbal consent, not implied consent, written consent. My heart began beating faster. Helen continued. "The access road is entirely part of your land." I nodded. "The spring yours. The septic field on your land. The parking area yours. The trails yours." I leaned back in the chair. I thought of Nathan's marketing plan. 3 luxury cabins, a pavilion, a sauna, parking, trails. All of it required land he did not own. Helen looked at me. Even if Nathan persuaded someone that he had a current interest in the cabin structure, which I do not believe he does, he could not lawfully operate the project he described without your permission. So the cabin alone gives him almost nothing. For his proposed business, very little. I felt something loosen inside my chest. For days, Nathan had been using legal language to make me feel uncertain. Authority, management, family rights, future ownership. He had taken fragments of truth and built a much larger claim around them. Then Helen found another page. This explains Thomas's thinking. It was not legal paperwork. It was a handwritten note. Thomas had written it on yellow legal paper. The date was 12 years earlier. I recognized the period immediately. Nathan's business failure. Thomas wrote that he loved both our children and wanted them to inherit something meaningful someday. But he did not want the mountain property used as collateral for debt, divided impulsively, or developed because one child needed money. He wanted the land protected during my lifetime. He wanted me to have complete authority over it. Then came the sentence that broke me. "A house can be replaced. Land is what gives it somewhere to stand." I covered my mouth. Helen waited. Thomas had said similar things when we were building the cabin. He believed people focused too much on structures, walls, roofs, kitchens. He loved the land itself, the ridge, the spring, the quiet, the soil beneath the porch, the place where the cabin belonged. And somehow 12 years before Nathan ever changed those locks, Thomas had created a legal structure around that exact belief. I read the rest. If Nathan ever believes that having a claim to the cabin gives him control over the mountain, he will be wrong. Do not argue with him about what sits on the land. Remember who owns the land underneath it. My tears fell onto the paper. He knew I whispered. Helen's voice was gentle. He knew Nathan's tendencies. I shook my head. That's what hurts. Not because Thomas had distrusted our son, because he had understood him. Thomas had seen a pattern I kept excusing. Nathan made commitments. Nathan became emotionally invested. Nathan moved forward. Then when consequences appeared, he asked the family to help make everything work. And because I was his mother, I usually did. I paid one credit card when he was 26. Thomas and I helped close the landscaping debt. We gave him money after his divorce. We called those things support. Maybe Thomas had quietly started wondering when support became permission to keep repeating the same behavior. I looked down at the letter again. Why didn't he tell me all of this? Helen considered the question. Maybe he thought he had. I almost protested. Then I remembered those final months. Thomas had tried to talk about everything. The insurance, the house, the bank accounts, the children. I had hated those conversations. Every time he talked about what would happen after he died, I changed the subject. Maybe some of this had been explained to me. Maybe grief had erased the details. But Thomas had planned for that too. Brianna must read first. He had not left me vulnerable because I had been too afraid to listen. He had left me instructions. Helen began organizing the documents. We need certified copies of these. Okay. And we should send formal notice concerning the commercial use. Okay. But before we do anything aggressive, I want you to think about what outcome you want. I looked at her. What do you mean? Do you want? Nathan removed immediately. Do you want the rentals canceled? Do you want to preserve the family relationship if possible? My answer came quickly. I want my cabin back. Helen nodded. And after that, that question was harder. I looked at Thomas's handwritten note. I did not want revenge. I did not want to destroy my son. But I was no longer willing to pretend that love required me to surrender whenever Nathan created an emergency. I want him to understand, I said. Understand what I folded Thomas's letter carefully. That changing a lock does not change who owns the ground beneath the door. Helen gave a small nod. Then she pulled one final document from the envelope. It was the recorded deed showing the 14-acre parcel in my name after Thomas's death. Clear, simple, mine. For the first time since Nathan opened that cabin door and told me to stop thinking of the place as mine alone, I did not feel frightened. I felt steady. Nathan had been looking at the cabin. Thomas had taught me to look beneath it. And beneath every chair, every bed, every welcome basket, every new lock and every promise Nathan had made to investors was 14 acres of land he could not use without me. 3 days after Helen and I opened the blue envelope, my daughter called me just after 7 in the evening. Mom, are you sitting down? I was. But the way Emily asked made me sit straighter. What happened? I found something. Her voice was tight, not angry, worried. After our first conversation about Nathan, Emily had apparently gone back through old emails and text messages. She said she wanted to know whether there had been other moments when Nathan had spoken as if the cabin were already his. At first she found nothing unusual. Then she remembered a conversation from late winter. Nathan had sent her an email about a possible family gathering at the cabin. She searched his name and the word mountain. That was how she found it. He forwarded me something by accident, Emily said. When? About 3 months ago. What was it, an email chain between him and someone named Charles Becker? I grabbed a pen. Who is Charles Becker? I looked him. What was it, an email chain between him and someone named Charles Becker? I grabbed a pen. Who is Charles Becker? I looked him up. He's involved with a private investment group in Knoxville. My stomach tightened. Send it to me. A minute later, the message appeared in my inbox. It was a forwarded chain containing several emails. I recognized Nathan's writing immediately. Short sentences, confident tone, always sounding as though a decision had already been made. The first message was from Charles. Nathan. The Townsend concept is interesting, but our partners need confidence that site control will not become an issue later. We are not interested in funding construction on land subject to an unresolved family dispute. Nathan's reply came several hours later. Site control is not a real obstacle. The cabin is already under family management, and the remaining land transfer is basically a paperwork formality. I read that sentence twice. Then I read it again. Paperwork formality. 14 acres that belong to me. My access road. My spring. My trees. My legal rights. Apparently all of that was a formality. I kept reading. Charles had asked whether written authorization from the landowner would be available before final funding. Nathan replied, "Once Mom sees how much money is involved, she won't say no." My hand tightened around the pen. The next line hurt worse. She's sentimental, but she's practical when pushed. I stopped. There it was. In Nathan's own words. Not confusion, not misunderstanding, not a forgotten conversation. He knew I had not agreed. He simply believed agreement could come later. After the commitments, after the investors, after the reservations, after the money. When pushed, I whispered the words aloud. Emily was still on the phone. "I'm sorry, Mom." I stared at the screen. For what? For not realizing what he was doing. "You didn't do this." I believed him when he said you two were already talking. So did everyone else, apparently. Emily was quiet. Then she said, "There's more." I scrolled lower. Nathan explained that the mountain location would become the model for 3 more ridgeline properties within 5 years. He mentioned projected annual revenue, corporate retreat packages, premium weekend pricing, seasonal events. He even described the property's untapped acreage. Untapped. That word almost made me laugh. As if land had no value unless someone squeezed money from it. Charles's responses were cautious. He asked about zoning, access, water, septic expansion, commercial insurance. Every question Nathan had asked me during those casual phone calls appeared in the email chain. Now I understood where they had come from. Nathan had not been gathering information for himself. He had been answering investors. Near the end of the chain, Charles wrote, "I need clarity before our next meeting. If your mother retains full authority over the acreage, we cannot assume future development rights." Nathan responded, "I understand. I'm handling the family side." Handling. That was what I had become. Not his mother, not the landowner, the family side. Something to manage while he built the real deal. I ended the call with Emily and immediately forwarded everything to Helen. She called 10 minutes later. "This is significant. Because he lied, because it shows what he knew and when he knew it." I walked into my living room and stood beside the window. "Can we stop him?" "We already can stop unauthorized development." "That's not what I mean." I swallowed. "Can we make him admit what he was doing?" Helen paused. "Legal documents can establish rights, Brianna. They cannot force insight." I hated how true that was. What happens with Charles Becker? "I would like to understand exactly what the investors were promised." "Can we contact him?" "Yes, carefully." The next morning, Charles called Helen after receiving a formal notice concerning ownership of the property. I sat in Helen's office while she put the call on speaker. Charles sounded older than I expected. Professional, controlled. "Mrs. Ross," he said, "I want to be clear that my group has not closed any investment involving your property. I appreciate that. We were evaluating Ridgeline's expansion proposal, based on what Nathan told you, based on materials submitted by the company." Helen spoke. "Did those materials state that Nathan owned the 14-acre parcel?" Charles paused. "Not exactly." That answer bothered me. What does not exactly mean? It means the language was carefully drafted. I explained that Nathan never directly claimed to hold current legal title to the land. Instead, the proposal used phrases such as family-controlled property, pending transfer, established management rights, an anticipated consolidation of ownership. Every phrase was technically softer than a direct lie. Together they created a very clear impression. Nathan expected the land to become available to the business soon. Did he tell you I had agreed? I asked. Charles hesitated. He indicated family approval was expected. Expected is not agreed. No, ma'am. And when you asked for written authorization, we were told it would be provided before closing. I looked at Helen. So that had been Nathan's timeline. He did not need my signature at the beginning. He needed it at the end. After everything else was ready. After he could put a number in front of me. After employees, investors' reservations and contracts made refusal feel destructive. Charles continued. Our interest depended heavily on the location. How heavily the cabin itself was attractive, but the acreage was the larger opportunity. Of course. I felt strangely calm. What were you planning to build? A limited hospitality development. 3 additional guest structures initially. Event space later depending on approvals. I already knew that from Nathan's website, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a new way. How many people, at full operation, potentially dozens of guests during event weekends? I imagined cars lining Thomas's quiet road, music across the ridge, construction near the spring, strangers walking trails where Thomas and I had once picked blackberries. And Nathan believed I would approve all of that. Charles chose his words carefully. He believed the economics would make approval likely. The economics. I almost smiled. Nathan had reduced me to a predictable variable. Give Mom a large enough number, apply enough pressure, she will move. After the call ended, I sat quietly. Helen closed her notebook. You look calmer than I expected. I am. Why? Because I finally understand. She waited. Nathan never thought he already owned the land. Helen nodded slowly. No. He knew I did. Yes. He just believed that didn't matter yet. That was the part that changed something in me. If Nathan had genuinely misunderstood an old document, I could have blamed confusion. If he believed Thomas intended him to inherit the cabin, I could have understood hope becoming entitlement. But this was different. Nathan knew my consent was missing. He had simply pushed forward until saying no would become painful enough that I might surrender. I thought about his email. She's sentimental, but she's practical when pushed. He knew me well enough to recognize my love for the property, but not well enough to understand what happened when someone treated that love as weakness. Helen slid a copy of the survey across her desk. The investor group has another site meeting scheduled Friday. At the cabin, yes. Is Nathan attending? I believe so. I looked at the property lines. 14 acres, a narrow access road, a parking area, the septic field, the spring, the land beneath every future promise Nathan had made. Then I'm going. Helen looked at me carefully. You understand that could become confrontational. I'm not going to fight with him. What are you going to do? I folded the survey. For weeks, Nathan has been showing people the cabin. I stood. Friday, I think it's time someone showed them the land. Friday morning was cool enough that I needed a light jacket. I left Knoxville before 8 with the survey folded inside my purse and Helen sitting beside me. Neither of us talked much during the drive. I had imagined this moment several times since learning about the investor meeting, and every version ended with Nathan shouting. That was what worried me most. Not because I was afraid of him, because I knew how easy it would be for me to become his mother instead of the landowner the moment he raised his voice. I had spent 42 years responding to Nathan's emotions. If he was hurt, I comforted him. If he was angry, I softened. If he was scared, I looked for a way to fix whatever had frightened him. That morning, I could not do that. When we turned onto the mountain road, I saw 5 vehicles near the cabin. Nathan's truck, Melissa's SUV, Charles Becker's black sedan, and 2 vehicles I did not recognize. A man in a reflective vest stood beside the parking area, talking to another man holding rolled plans. Nathan spotted my car before I had even stopped. His expression changed instantly. He walked toward us as I stepped out. Mom. Not a greeting, a warning. What are you doing here? Here I looked toward the cabin. I'm inspecting my property. His eyes moved to Helen. You brought a lawyer. Helen has every right to be here with me. This is a private business meeting. I almost smiled at the irony. On my land. Nathan lowered his voice. You're embarrassing me. I thought about the first morning when I had stood outside my own locked door while strangers moved through my living room. I survived it, I said. You will too. Charles Becker approached us. He shook Helen's hand first, then mine. Mrs. Ross, Mr. Becker. His expression was polite but cautious. Nathan stepped between us slightly. This meeting is about Ridgeline's development proposal, Helen answered. And the development proposal concerns property owned by my client. Nathan turned toward her. We already discussed the cabin documents. No, Helen said. You discussed one document. He stiffened. I saw the moment he understood that we had found more. What did you do? The question was directed at me. I read what your father left. For perhaps the first time since the locks were changed. Nathan looked uncertain. Melissa came down the porch steps. What does that mean? It means Helen said we now have the full ownership record. Nathan recovered quickly. Then you know I have rights connected to the cabin. Potential future rights, Helen said. Under conditions you have not yet satisfied. His face reddened. That's not how Dad explained it. Thomas's recorded documents are quite clear. Charles shifted his weight. I think we need to clarify something before we continue. Nathan looked at him. Charles, this is a family disagreement. It doesn't affect the project. I opened my purse. Yes, it does. I removed the survey. A licensed surveyor named Mark Delaney had arrived separately and was waiting near the road. I waved him over. Nathan looked from Mark to me. What is this, a boundary inspection? Seriously, Mark unfolded a larger copy of the property survey across the hood of my car. Charles and the other men gathered around. Nathan stayed a few feet away. Mark pointed to the outlined parcel. 14.2 acres. Current deed holder Brianna Ross. His finger moved toward the road. This access road lies entirely within Mrs. Ross's parcel. Then to the flattened area where the cars were parked. Primary parking area also within her parcel. He traced a line behind the cabin. Existing septic field extends here. He moved lower. Water access and spring area are here. Then he pointed to the proposed development zone shown on one of Ridgeline's concept maps. Every planned additional structure I was provided falls on land titled solely to Mrs. Ross. Nathan interrupted. The cabin is different. I turned toward him. I know. His expression changed. He had expected me to argue ownership of the cabin. I did not. The cabin has separate language in Dad's estate documents, he said. I know that too. Melissa looked confused. Then what are we arguing about? I looked at her. We're not. I turned back to the survey. The cabin can sit where it sits. What Nathan cannot do is use my land commercially without my written permission. Nathan laughed sharply. Mom people need access to the cabin. Yes. And the cabin has historically had access. For family use. Helen spoke. Commercial operation is a different matter. Nathan's eyes flashed. This is ridiculous. Mark pointed toward the porch. Even the front steps extend beyond the footprint of the cabin structure into land covered solely by Mrs. Ross's deed. Charles looked up. The parking Mrs. Ross's, the road Mrs. Ross's, septic Mrs. Ross's, water Mrs. Ross's. Charles turned toward Nathan. Nathan's confidence began to crack. This was always going to be resolved through a long-term lease. Charles stared at him. You told us site control was essentially complete. It is once my mother signs. I felt something inside me go still. There it was. Once my mother signs. As if my signature were a final administrative step rather than a decision. I walked toward the porch. Nathan followed. Where are you going? I stopped beside the first step. This is what I wanted everyone to see. I pointed down. You changed the lock on that door. Nathan said nothing. You removed my photographs. You changed the furniture. You brought investors here. You took reservations, and all that time you behaved as though possession meant control. His jaw tightened. You're making a scene. No. My voice remained quiet. I'm correcting one. I looked directly at him. You changed the lock on a door, Nathan. You didn't change the deed beneath your feet. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed louder in that silence. Nathan glanced toward Charles. This can still work. I believed he meant the business. But there was desperation underneath it now. I removed a document from my purse. Helen had prepared it. This is formal written notice. Nathan did not take it. Melissa did. She scanned the first paragraph. What is this commercial use of the property is not authorized. Nathan looked at me. You're shutting us down. I am requiring you to cancel every commercial reservation connected to this property. His face hardened. You can't just do that. I can. Helen added. Any continued commercial use after written notice could create substantially greater legal problems. Charles said nothing. He did not need to. His expression told me the meeting was over. Nathan looked around at the people gathered near the cabin. For the first time, he seemed to understand what I had been feeling for days. Exposed. He stepped closer to me. You came here to humiliate me. No. Then what do you call this? I came here because private conversations did not stop you. His mouth tightened. I took a breath. I had decided on my terms before leaving home. Not revenge. Not immediate destruction. A boundary. You have 48 hours. His eyebrows drew together. For what? Cancel every commercial reservation for this cabin. He stared at me. Remove my land from every Ridgeline proposal brochure, investor document, and website. His eyes narrowed. And if I don't, then Helen takes the next steps. What steps? Helen answered calmly. Injunction, formal notices to relevant parties, and whatever additional remedies become necessary. Nathan looked at me as though I had become someone he did not recognize. Maybe I had. Or maybe I was finally someone he had never been forced to see. His mother without fear. His mother without guilt. His mother holding the deed. Charles began gathering his papers. The other men followed him toward their cars. Nathan watched them leave. Months of promises were driving down the road, one vehicle at a time. I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. I felt sad. Deeply, quietly sad. This was my son. I had once stood beside his bed when he was 7 and frightened by thunder. Now I was standing beside him while something he wanted badly began falling apart. But for the first time I understood that love did not require me to lie about who had caused the storm. As Helen and I walked toward my car, Nathan called after me. Mom. I turned. His anger was gone. In its place was something worse. Panic. If you do this, you could destroy my company. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, no, Nathan. My voice did not shake. If your company depends on property you never had permission to use, I'm not the one destroying it. Nathan showed up at my house Sunday afternoon, almost exactly 48 hours after I had given him the deadline. I had spent most of the weekend waiting for some indication that he had canceled the reservations. Nothing. No message. No apology. No confirmation from Ridgeline. Then just after 3, I heard a truck pull into my driveway. Nathan did not knock gently. 3 hard knocks struck the front door. When I opened it, I immediately knew this was not a peace offering. His eyes were tired. His shirt was wrinkled. There were dark circles beneath his eyes I had not noticed at the cabin. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He walked directly into the kitchen, the same room where I had helped him with homework, iced his birthday cakes, and loaned him money more times than I wanted to count. He placed both hands on the back of a chair. You called Charles again? Helen communicated with his attorneys. He pulled out. I said nothing. Nathan laughed bitterly. Of course you already knew. I knew the project was being reviewed. No. It's dead. That word hung between us. Dead. Nathan paced toward the window. Charles's group suspended everything. The lender froze the financing. They won't release another dollar until the property issue is resolved. The property issue is resolved. He turned. No, Mom. You're choosing not to resolve it. I stared at him. There is a difference. Not to me. That may be the problem. His face tightened. You think this is some lesson. I think this is my land. I know it's your land. The admission came so quickly that I almost missed its significance. For weeks he had wrapped everything in vague language about family rights and management authority. Now under pressure, the truth had become simple. He knew. He had always known. Nathan dropped into the chair. For the first time, he looked less like an angry businessman and more like someone who had not slept in days. I need you to understand what happens if you don't sign. Sign what a lease. I remained standing. What kind of lease? 30 years. I almost laughed. You consider 30 years temporary. It has to be long-term or the financing doesn't work. So this was the paperwork formality. His eyes lifted toward me. You saw the emails. Yes. He looked away. Emily had no right to send those. You had no right to describe my consent as inevitable. I was trying to keep a deal moving, with something that belonged to me. He rubbed both hands over his face. Fine, I handled it badly. Badly. Yes, you changed the locks. I know. You took reservations. I know. You presented the property to investors. I know. You told them my signature would come later. I said I handled it badly. His voice rose. I stayed quiet. Nathan leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then he said, Do you want to know why yes? Because if I had come to you 6 months ago and said I wanted to turn Dad's cabin into a commercial property, you would have said no before I finished the sentence. I felt no need to deny it. You're probably right. He looked at me sharply. There. Exactly. That does not justify avoiding the question. I needed momentum. No, Nathan, you needed me cornered. His expression changed. I continued. You wanted contracts signed, investors committed, money spent, reservations made. Then you wanted to put the consequences in front of me and say, look what happens if you refuse. He stood again. You make it sound calculated, wasn't it? He did not answer. That silence told me everything. I sat across from him. How bad is it? His eyes narrowed. What the business? For the first time he looked afraid. Not angry. Afraid. He lowered himself into the chair. Bad. How bad? He stared at the table. Ridgeline grew too fast. I waited. We had a strong year. Corporate bookings went up. I hired guides, bought vehicles, leased equipment, with cash some, and the rest financing. I folded my hands. How much? He shook his head. It doesn't matter. It matters if you expect me to save it. He looked up. I personally guaranteed some of it. My stomach tightened. How much, Nathan? Enough. There were overdue vendor payments, vehicle leases, deposits already spent on expansion work, marketing contracts, a bridge loan Nathan had expected to refinance once Charles's investment closed. The more he explained, the clearer the picture became. Ridgeline was not expanding from strength. It was expanding to outrun its existing problems. The mountain project had become the answer to everything. New investor money, new bookings, new credibility, new debt replacing old debt. And my property sat at the center of the plan. I thought if we got the first location running, everything would stabilize. You thought. Yes, Mom, I thought. What happens now? His eyes were red. I start selling equipment. I lay people off. Maybe the company survives smaller. Maybe. I hated seeing him like that. Every instinct I had as a mother told me to make the fear disappear. I could picture the solution. One signature, a 30-year lease. Nathan's project revived, his employees protected, his pride restored, my son safe again. That was exactly why I had to be careful. Nathan must have seen hesitation in my face. He leaned forward. Mom, this is not about stealing from you. I said nothing. You keep the land, on paper. You get lease income. That isn't why I kept it. I know. Do you? His voice softened. Dad would want you to help me. That hurt more than I expected. Don't do that. What? Don't use your father. I'm not using him. You are. Nathan stood. He built that place for the family. Yes. And he wanted us to have it someday. Someday. He would not stand there and watch his son lose everything if he could stop it. I felt tears threaten, but I refused to let them control my voice. You don't know what your father would do. I knew him too. Yes, you did. Nathan walked toward the kitchen counter. Then he turned. I have people depending on me. And you depended on something you did not own. You keep repeating that, because you keep avoiding it. His fist tightened at his side. This isn't just some selfish dream. I never said it was. Then help me. There it was. Not ask me. Help me. The same word Nathan had used after his landscaping company failed, after his divorce, after the credit cards. Help. A word that had always meant I carried part of the consequence. He stepped closer. I need a 30-year lease, commercial access, development approval. That's it. That's it. You'd still own the land. But I would lose control over how it was used for 30 years. You'd be protecting your son's future. I looked at him. What about mine? He froze. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Nathan said quietly, "So you're really willing to let my company collapse over this?" I shook my head. No, that's exactly what you're doing. No, Nathan. You made decisions that put your company here. His face hardened again. So that's your answer. I haven't given you one yet. He stared at me. I could see hope return. I hated that too. Because part of me still wanted to give him what he wanted. Part of me wanted Sunday dinner back. Christmas without tension. My son calling because he missed me, rather than because he needed something. Nathan reached into his jacket and placed a folder on the table. Inside was the proposed lease. I need it signed tomorrow. I looked at the document. 30 years. Commercial development. Expansion rights. Access. Water. Parking. Everything Thomas had protected. Nathan moved toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. You always told me family comes first. I looked at him. Yes. Then prove it. The door closed behind him. I remained at the table. For nearly an hour I stared at the signature line. I could save him. That was the terrible part. This was not a situation where I was powerless. One signature could put his entire plan back into motion. And because I loved him, the pen felt heavier than any weapon. That evening I called Helen. I'm considering signing. She was silent for several seconds. Then she asked, why? Because he could lose everything. And what would signing teach him? I closed my eyes. I don't know. I think you do. I looked toward the framed photograph of Thomas on my bookshelf. Then Helen said something unexpected. Brianna, there is another envelope. I opened my eyes. What envelope? One Thomas left in the property file. For me, no. Her voice softened. It's addressed to Nathan. The next morning I was sitting in Helen's office before 9. The unsigned lease Nathan had left on my kitchen table was inside my purse. I had brought it with me because some part of me still had not decided what to do. That frightened me. After everything Nathan had done, after the locks, the investors, the reservations, the pressure, I was still capable of finding reasons to rescue him. Helen placed a sealed envelope on the desk. Nathan's name was written across the front in Thomas's handwriting. I stared at it. When did he write this? About 12 years ago, Helen said. Around the same time he restructured the mountain property. I looked at her. Why didn't you give it to Nathan after Thomas died? Because Thomas left instructions. What instructions? Helen opened an old file and read from a typed memorandum. Deliver to Nathan Ross only if a dispute arises concerning ownership, control, borrowing, development, or financial use of the mountain property. I felt a chill. He planned for this. Not this exact situation, but something like it. Helen nodded. I looked at the envelope again. Thomas had known our son. Maybe better than I wanted to admit. I called Emily. Then I called Nathan. Neither was pleased about coming. Emily arrived first. Nathan came 20 minutes later. He entered Helen's conference room looking exhausted. His eyes went immediately to me. Did you sign? No hello? No question about why Emily was there. Only the lease. I placed the folder on the table. Not yet. His shoulders dropped slightly. Mom, I told you I need it today. I know. Then what are we doing here? Helen slid the sealed envelope toward him. Nathan looked down. The color in his face changed. He recognized the handwriting instantly. "What is this, a letter from your father?" Helen said. Nathan looked at me. "You had this? No. When did you find it? Recently." He picked up the envelope but did not open it. For several seconds his thumb rested beneath the flap. Emily sat silently beside me. Nathan finally tore it open. There were 3 handwritten pages. He read the first one quickly, then slower. By the second page his jaw had tightened. By the third he stopped reading entirely. He placed the letter on the table. "This is ridiculous." My stomach sank. "Nathan." "No." He stood. "Dad wrote this 12 years ago. Yes, I was 30. Yes, I had one business fail. It wasn't just the business." His eyes flashed. "So now you're going to sit there and list everything I ever did wrong." "That is not why we're here." "Then why are we here?" Helen said calmly. "Because Thomas asked for that letter to be given to you, if the mountain property ever became part of a dispute like this." Nathan laughed once. A hard, bitter sound. "He didn't trust me." I looked at him. "He loved you." "That wasn't what I said." Emily spoke softly. "Nathan just finished reading it." "I read enough." "No," I said. "Read the rest." He looked at me. For a moment, I thought he would leave. Instead, he sat again. He picked up the letter. This time he read aloud. "Nathan, if you are reading this, then there is probably something involving Moneyland or the cabin that you believe needs to happen quickly." His voice slowed. I could almost hear Thomas speaking. "You have always been brave about taking risks. That can be a strength. But there is something I hope you learn before those risks cost you more than money." Nathan stopped. Emily whispered, "Keep going." His throat moved. "You have a habit of making commitments first and asking for help afterward." Silence filled the room. Nathan's fingers tightened around the paper. "When you were younger, I called it impulsiveness. Later, I understood it was something else. You move forward until the people who love you feel responsible for preventing the consequences." I looked down. That sentence hurt me too, because I had participated in that pattern. Thomas continued through Nathan's voice. "I have helped you more than once. Your mother has helped you even more. We did it because we love you. But love becomes dangerous when it teaches someone that another person will always absorb the cost of his choices." Nathan stopped reading again. His eyes had gone red. He looked toward the window. I wanted to reach for him. Every maternal instinct told me to touch his arm. I didn't. After a moment, he continued. "The mountain property is structured the way it is, because I do not want it used to solve an emergency created somewhere else." Nathan's voice cracked slightly. "If you someday have a good plan for that land, ask your mother. Ask before you spend money. Ask before you make promises. Ask before anyone depends on your answer." My chest tightened. Then came the line that seemed to change the air in the room. "If you are reading this because you already made the promises, then losing the deal may be the lesson I was trying to protect you long enough to learn." Nathan lowered the letter. No one spoke. I was crying quietly now. Emily was too. Nathan stared at the pages. Finally, he said, "He thought I was a failure." "No," I said. He looked at me sharply. "Did you even hear that?" "Yes. He designed the property because he thought I couldn't be trusted. Hein designed it because he knew how you reacted under pressure. That's the same thing." "No." I leaned forward. "Your father believed you were capable of building things. He also knew you had a habit of building them on commitments you could not always support." Nathan looked away. I continued. "And I helped you avoid learning that." His eyes returned to me. "What does that mean?" I thought about the old credit card debt, the failed landscaping company, the check we wrote after his divorce, the quiet loans, the times I had told Thomas, "He just needs one more chance." I kept protecting you from the end of your own decisions. Nathan's expression hardened. "So now you want to punish me?" "No. Feels like punishment. That does not make it punishment." He pushed the letter onto the table. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one losing a company." "No. I took the lease from my purse. But I am the one being asked to give up control of my land for 30 years, so you don't have to face what happened." Nathan stared at the folder. You could save the company. Yes. That answer surprised him. I did not deny it. I could save it. That was the truth. I probably could, I said. Then why wouldn't you? Because I love you. The thought came before the words, and for the first time I understood how cruel that answer might sound to him. Because if I sign this, I said you learn that your father was right in the worst possible way. Nathan said nothing. You learn that you can make the commitment first, ignore permission, spend the money, promise the investors, and eventually your mother will rescue you because she can't stand watching you hurt. His eyes filled. That's not fair. No. What you did wasn't fair. Emily reached for his hand. He pulled away. I continued carefully. I am not saying I will never help you again. Sounds like it. I am saying I will not give you my land because you made it the solution to a problem without asking me. Nathan stood. For a moment, anger returned. Then it disappeared almost as quickly. He looked tired, older than 42. What am I supposed to do? It was the first time he had asked that question without demanding that I be the answer. I swallowed. You sell what you need to sell. His eyes dropped. You shrink the business. He nodded once barely. You tell people the truth. Another small nod. And then you rebuild if you can. And if I can't, I felt tears slip down my face. Then you survive losing something. Nathan stared at me. That's Dad talking. No. I shook my head. That's me finally understanding him. He picked up Thomas's letter. He folded it carefully. Then he put it back into the envelope. I hated him for writing this. Helen said nothing. Nathan looked at me. I still kind of do, I understand. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. Are you signing the lease? I looked at the folder. Then I closed it. No. Nathan shut his eyes. I expected anger. Instead, his shoulders sagged. Okay. Just one word. No threat. No accusation. He left. Emily stayed beside me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she asked, Do you think he'll forgive you? I looked at the closed door. I hope so. And if he doesn't, I touched Thomas's letter still lying in my mind like a weight. Then I'll have to live with that. That afternoon, Helen notified Nathan's lender and Charles Becker that I would not authorize the long-term lease. By evening, the meeting that would determine Ridgeline's future had been scheduled. Nathan would have one final chance to explain what he had promised, and this time I would be sitting in the room when he did. The meeting took place Tuesday morning in a conference room at the lender's office in Knoxville. Nathan arrived before me. So did Charles Becker. Helen and I came in together, and a senior loan officer named Robert Mills joined us a few minutes later. No one seemed comfortable. The room was too bright, too quiet, too formal for something that had begun with a changed lock on a mountain cabin. Nathan sat across from me. He looked different. Not defeated exactly. But the sharp confidence I had seen at the cabin was gone. He had Thomas's letter with him. I could see the folded envelope resting beside his notebook. Robert began. We're here to clarify the status of the Townsend property and determine whether Ridgeline Retreat's expansion proposal can proceed in any form. Nathan nodded. Charles did not. Robert turned toward Helen. Ms. Ward, can you summarize your client's position? Helen opened a folder. Mrs. Ross owns the 14.2-acre parcel, including the access road parking area, water source septic area, and all undeveloped acreage. Robert glanced at me. And commercial use authorization not granted. Development rights not granted. Long-term lease declined. Nathan shifted in his chair. Robert looked at him. Mr. Ross, is any part of that inaccurate? For several seconds, Nathan said nothing. Then he shook his head. No. That one word changed the room. Charles leaned back slowly. Robert continued. The financing materials submitted by Ridgeline referred to established management rights and an anticipated consolidation of site control. Nathan nodded. That was based on family documents involving the cabin. Helen spoke. The management agreement never conveyed site control. Nathan looked toward her. I know that now. There was no anger in his voice, only exhaustion. Robert opened another file. The concern is not simply whether a technical statement was false. The concern is whether the overall proposal created an impression that was materially more certain than the facts supported. Nathan's jaw tightened. I never said I owned the land. Charles finally spoke. No. His tone was controlled. You didn't. Nathan looked at him. Charles continued. But every conversation we had led me to believe your mother's approval was essentially assured. I believed it was. That is not the same as having it. I know. Charles tapped a document in front of him. You told us the remaining family paperwork was a formality. Nathan stared down at the table. Yes. Was that true silence? I watched my son struggle with the question. Months earlier, he would have defended himself. He would have explained, qualified, blamed timing, blamed misunderstanding. That morning, he simply said no. Charles nodded once. The admission seemed to matter. Not enough to save the deal, but enough to strip away the last excuse. Robert turned to me. Mrs. Ross, is there any possibility you would reconsider a commercial lease if terms were modified? Nathan looked up. For the first time that morning, our eyes met. I could see hope flicker across his face. A smaller project, shorter lease, more money, some compromise. My answer could still change everything. I thought about Thomas, about the spring, about the quiet road, about Nathan telling investors my consent would come once I saw the numbers. Then I thought about what he had asked in Helen's office. What am I supposed to do if I signed now? I would give him the same answer I had given for years. Come to me after the mistake. I will make the consequences smaller. No, I said. Nathan looked down. Charles exhaled. Robert closed the folder. Then the project cannot proceed as proposed. There was no dramatic sound, no gavel, no shouting, just paper sliding across a polished table. Yet I knew I was watching months of Nathan's plans collapse. Charles folded his hands. Our group is withdrawing from the Townsend expansion. Nathan nodded faintly. We understand. We may revisit other opportunities with Ridgeline later, Charles said, but not under the current capital structure. Nathan looked up. So you're completely out of this deal, yes? Nathan swallowed. What about the smaller operating business? That is a separate question. Robert answered that one. The current lending arrangements will need review. Without the anticipated investment in property access, some obligations may need restructuring. I knew what that meant. Sell assets, reduce expenses, possibly layoffs, possibly worse. Nathan leaned back in his chair. His face had gone pale. I wanted to reach across the table. I did not. Charles gathered several papers, then paused. There is one issue we need to address before we leave. Nathan looked at him. The representations regarding the property. Helen straightened slightly. Charles continued. I am not alleging criminal fraud. I felt my chest tighten anyway. The materials were carefully worded. There was no forged deed or explicit statement that Nathan held title to the 14 acres. Nathan's shoulders loosened by the smallest amount. But Charles continued. The business repeatedly presented expected family approval as though it carried little meaningful risk. Nathan said nothing. That damaged our confidence. I understand. I hope you do. Nathan looked at him. Charles's voice softened slightly. You had an interesting company before this expansion. Had you may still have one. Nathan's expression hardened briefly. Then Charles added, but you were trying to become a much bigger company before proving you could safely support the smaller one. That sentence sounded painfully similar to Thomas. Nathan seemed to hear it too. He looked toward the envelope beside his notebook. The meeting lasted another 40 minutes. Numbers were discussed. Deposits, reservations, cancellation liabilities, vendor contracts, vehicle leases. Nathan would have to refund every booking tied to my cabin. Ridgeline would need to remove the property from its marketing materials immediately. Several planned purchases would be canceled. 2 leased vehicles could be returned with penalties. Some equipment could be sold. Robert believed the company might survive if Nathan reduced operations quickly enough. But nothing was guaranteed. When the meeting ended, everyone stood. Charles shook my hand. I'm sorry this became a family matter. It was a family matter before you ever saw it. He nodded. Then he turned to Nathan. I hope the next thing you build starts with what you actually control. Nathan gave a tired smile. So do I. Charles left. Robert left next. Helen stepped into the hall to take a call, leaving Nathan and me alone. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, You got what you wanted. I felt the old instinct to defend myself. Instead, I asked, Do you really believe that? He stared at the empty chair where Charles had been sitting. I don't know what I believe right now. I didn't want your company destroyed. You knew this could happen. Yes. And you still said no. Yes. He looked at me. There was pain in his eyes, but less anger than before. Why does that sound so easy when you say it? It isn't. You don't look upset. That almost made me laugh. Nathan, I barely slept last night. He looked surprised. I kept imagining you losing everything. I might. I know. My voice cracked. That is why this hurts. He rubbed his hands together. I have to let people go. I'm sorry. I have to sell 2 vehicles. I'm sorry. I may lose the office. I'm sorry. His eyes flashed. Stop saying that. I fell silent. He stood. I don't want you to be sorry. I want you to fix it. There it was again. Smaller now. Less like a demand. More like an old reflex. Nathan heard himself. I saw it in his face. He closed his eyes. Then he whispered God. I waited. After a moment, he sat back down. That's what Dad meant. I said nothing. I'm sitting here telling you everything that's going wrong so you'll feel responsible for stopping it. My throat tightened. Yes. Nathan stared at the table. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I think sometimes we don't see patterns until they finally stop working. He gave a humorless laugh. Lucky me. No. I shook my head. Painful you. He looked at me. For once, I did not see a businessman. Or the angry son who changed my locks. I saw a tired man confronting himself. That did not erase what he had done. But it mattered. Nathan picked up Thomas's envelope. I'm canceling the reservations today. Thank you. I'll remove the property from everything. Thank you. He stood. At the door, he stopped. Melissa is furious. With me? With both of us. I was not surprised. She thought the lease was practically guaranteed. So did you. I know. He looked down. That's the part I have to live with. Then he left. I remained alone in the conference room for another minute. The deal was gone. Nathan would pay for his choices. And I could still feel the terrible temptation to run after him and make it easier. But Thomas's words stayed with me. Losing the deal may be the lesson. I finally understood that consequences were not always cruelty. Sometimes they were the first honest thing left when every excuse had run out. For almost 3 weeks after the lender meeting, Nathan barely spoke to me. Not completely. There were practical messages. Reservation canceled. Website updated. Equipment being sold Friday. The kind of communication that could have come from a business associate instead of my son. I answered each message simply. Thank you. I'm glad that's handled. Let me know if there is anything involving the property that Helen needs to review. I never asked whether he was angry with me. I already knew the answer. And I refused to apologize for the boundary that had finally forced both of us to see the truth. Ridgeline survived, but barely. Nathan sold 2 vehicles and most of the equipment he had purchased for the expansion. He canceled the lease on the larger office he had rented 6 months earlier and moved the remaining operation into a much smaller space. 4 employees lost their jobs. That was the part I struggled with most. Those people had families, bills, plans of their own. Nathan called me one evening after telling them. His voice sounded hollow. I had to let Sarah go. I remembered Sarah from a company picnic the previous summer. She had 2 young daughters. I'm sorry, so am I. There was a pause. Then Nathan said, I kept thinking we'd grow into the expenses. I sat quietly. He continued. Every time something got tight, I told myself the next contract would solve it. I knew better than to turn the conversation into a lesson. He did not need me to repeat Thomas's letter. He was living it. So I only said, that sounds exhausting. It was. Another pause. Still is. Then he ended the call. It was not reconciliation, but it was the first conversation we had had in weeks where he did not ask me to fix anything. A few days later, Emily told me Nathan had accepted temporary consulting work with an outdoor hospitality company in Gatlinburg. That's good, I said. He hates it. Why? Because he says it feels like going backward. I understood. Nathan had always measured progress by size. More clients, more employees, more equipment, more properties. Maybe learning that smaller could also mean safer would take time. Melissa was having a harder time. According to Emily, she had supported the expansion because she believed Nathan had already secured my approval. When the truth came out, she felt embarrassed. Not just because the deal collapsed, because Nathan had allowed her to repeat his assumptions to other people as if they were facts. Their marriage became strained. I stayed out of it. That was new for me too. The old Brianna would have called, invited them to dinner, found ways to bring everyone into the same room until the discomfort became manageable. This time I reminded myself that not every crack was mine to repair. Then on a Thursday afternoon, Nathan came to my house. No warning, no angry knocking. I was trimming dead leaves from the plants on my back patio when I heard a car door close. Nathan appeared around the side of the house. I was carrying something small in his hand. Hi. Hi. He looked uncomfortable. Can we talk? I set the garden shears down. Of course. We went into the kitchen. Nathan did not sit immediately. For a moment he stood beside the table looking at the place where he had left the 30-year lease weeks earlier. Then he opened his hand. A key lay in his palm. The new cabin key. He placed it on the table between us. I stared at it. I changed the locks back, he said. I looked up. The original lock, not the exact original, but the same style. I nodded. Thank you. The commercial furniture is gone too. I know. I put your photographs back. That stopped me. All of them. Yes. Where did you store them in boxes at the cabin? Were they damaged? No. He hesitated. I wrapped Dad's picture myself. My throat tightened. Nathan sat. I went up there alone yesterday. I remained standing. I thought I should see it after everything was removed. How did that feel? He gave a small, humorless laugh. Empty. I understood what he meant. Not physically empty. The opposite. Without the branded baskets and staged decorations, the cabin had returned to what it had always been. Family photographs, old furniture, scratches in the pine floor, Thomas everywhere. Nathan rubbed his thumb across the edge of the table. I sat on the porch for about an hour. That was your father's favorite place, I know. Silence passed between us. Then Nathan said, I'm sorry. I had imagined hearing those words many times. In my imagination, they brought immediate relief. They did not. They brought sadness. Because apologies do not erase the road that makes them necessary. What are you sorry for? He looked at me. All of it. I need more than that. He nodded. I could see that he had expected the question. I'm sorry I used the cabin without asking. He paused. I'm sorry I changed the locks. Another pause. I'm sorry I made the business plan before I had your permission. His voice became quieter. And I'm sorry I treated your approval like something I could force if I created enough pressure. I sat across from him. Nathan stared at the key. I told myself I was building something for the family. Did you believe that at first? And later he shook his head. Later I think I just needed it to be true. He took a breath. Because if it was for the family, then I wasn't stealing control from you. I was just moving faster than you. The honesty hurt, but it mattered. Nathan continued. I kept telling people the land would be available because admitting I didn't have permission would have made the whole thing look stupid. Not stupid. Reckless. Yes. He nodded. I know that now. I looked at my son. His face seemed older than it had a month earlier. Not physically. Something in his expression had changed. Less certainty. Maybe more humility. I sold the last extra trailer yesterday, he said. How much debt is left? A lot. Can you manage it if consulting work stays steady? And ridgeline smaller. He smiled faintly. Very small. That might not be bad. I'm trying to believe that. I understood that too. Nathan looked around my kitchen. Then he said something I did not expect. I kept calling the cabin my future. I waited. Every time I talked to investors, that's how I thought about it. His eyes met mine. But yesterday, sitting on the porch, I realized something. What I was treating your present like it was already my inheritance. The words landed quietly. He looked down. I kept calling it my future because that sounded better than admitting I was trying to take yours. For several seconds, I could not speak. Then I reached across the table and placed my hand near his. Not on it. Near it. Nathan, I love you. His eyes filled. I know. But I don't trust you with the property right now. He nodded. I know that too. That surprised me. No defense, no anger, no attempt to negotiate. I continued. Forgiveness and trust are different things. He looked at me. I want to forgive you. His throat moved. But trust comes back through what you do next. Nathan nodded slowly. I understand. Then he picked up the key and pushed it closer to me. I don't want it. I frowned. What, the spare key? You can leave it. No. He shook his head. I don't want access unless you give it to me again. That mattered more than he probably understood. For the first time since all of this began, Nathan was not trying to define his own rights. He was accepting mine. I closed my fingers around the key. All right. He stood. At the doorway, he hesitated. Mom. Yes. Do you think I'll ever be welcome there again? My heart ached. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to make everything better. But that would have been another kind of rescue. So I gave him the truth. I hope so. He nodded. That's fair. Then he left. I remained at the kitchen table with the key in my hand. A month earlier, that small piece of metal had represented humiliation. My son had changed a lock and tried to make me feel like a visitor in my own life. Now he had returned it without demanding anything in exchange. It was not enough to restore trust. But it was something I had not seen from him before. Accountability without negotiation. And for the first time I began to believe that maybe losing the deal had not destroyed my son. Maybe it had finally given him the chance to become someone who no longer needed his mother to save him. The first time I returned to the cabin after Nathan gave me back the key, I went alone. It was early October. The leaves along the road had begun turning red and gold, and the mountains looked almost exactly as they had the autumn Thomas and I finished the porch. For once, there were no unfamiliar cars in the driveway. No investors. No workers. No ridgeline signs. Just my old sedan beneath the trees and the sound of wind moving through the branches. I stood outside the cabin for a long moment before unlocking the door. My photographs were back on the mantel. Thomas holding Nathan beside the fireplace, Emily painting the porch railing, the four of us standing together one Christmas when both children were still young enough to complain about matching sweaters. The commercial coffee station was gone, so were the branded baskets and expensive throws. In their place were the mismatched mugs Thomas and I had collected over the years. The cabin looked imperfect again. I had never been so grateful for imperfection. That afternoon I carried an old wooden sign from the storage barn. Thomas had carved it nearly 25 years earlier. Ross Family Cabin. The letters were uneven because Nathan, 14 at the time, had insisted on helping his father. For years the sign had hung beside the porch. Nathan removed it when he turned the cabin into Ridgeline's flagship property. I cleaned the dust from it and hung it back in its old place. Then I sat on the porch. For the first time since all of this began, I allowed myself to think about what came next. Not next week, not Nathan's debt, not Ridgeline. Years from now. I was 68. Someday the property would belong to someone else. Pretending otherwise would not protect it. So Helen and I updated my estate documents. I did not cut Nathan out. Several people probably would have. There had been moments when I considered it. But revenge was never what I wanted. The 14 acres would eventually pass equally for the benefit of Nathan and Emily through a trust. Neither child would be able to mortgage the land alone. Neither could sell development rights without the other's agreement and independent trustee review. Neither could use an expected inheritance as collateral for a business venture. The cabin would remain a family property unless both children agreed otherwise, under the trust's protections. When Helen finished explaining everything, she asked, "Are you comfortable with Nathan still benefiting eventually?" I thought about it. Yes. Why? Because consequences are supposed to teach something, not become a life sentence. Helen smiled. That sounds like Thomas. Maybe he finally wore me down. Over the next several months, Nathan kept his distance from the property. He did not ask for a key. He did not ask about my will. He did not ask how much the land was worth. Instead, he worked. The consulting job in Gatlinburg became steady. Ridgeline survived with fewer clients and only 2 employees. Nathan stopped talking about national expansion. He began organizing smaller guided retreats using properties he rented properly through written agreements. One afternoon he called me. "I signed a contract today." My stomach tightened automatically. He laughed softly. "Don't worry. I actually read this one." I smiled. Progress. And I asked permission before making promises. That's bigger progress. We both laughed. It was the first easy conversation we had shared in months. Melissa and Nathan were still working through their own problems. I knew enough to understand their marriage had been strained badly by what happened, but I stayed out of it. That was part of my lesson too. Love did not make me responsible for every uncomfortable thing happening around my children. Sometimes the healthiest thing I could do was leave a problem with the people who created it. Spring arrived before I invited Nathan back to the cabin. I did not plan the moment dramatically. One Saturday morning, I simply called him. "I'm driving to the mountain tomorrow." There was a pause. "Okay. Would you like to come?" Silence. Then quietly, "Are you sure?" "Yes." He met me at my house the next morning. We drove together. Nathan barely spoke as we climbed the mountain road. When the cabin appeared through the trees, he looked toward the old wooden sign. He smiled. "You put it back. It belongs there." We carried groceries inside. Nathan stopped when he saw the family photographs. He touched the frame containing the picture of Thomas holding him. "I remember this. You were 14. I thought Dad was going to drop me. You weighed almost as much as he did." Nathan laughed. Later we made coffee and sat on the porch. The mountains stretched blue across the horizon. For a while neither of us spoke. Then Nathan said, "I used to think Dad was trying to control me." I looked at him. The letter, the property arrangement, all of it. He rubbed his hands together. "But I've been thinking about what he wrote." I waited. "He wasn't protecting the land from me." No, Nathan shook his head. "He was protecting me from the version of myself that thought every risk had to work because someone would catch me if it didn't." I felt my throat tighten. "That sounds about right." He stared toward the ridge. "I wish I learned it while he was alive." "So do I." We sat quietly again. After a few minutes, I went inside. In my purse was something I had carried for several weeks, the spare key. I returned to the porch and held it out. Nathan looked at my hand, then at me. "What's that?" "You know what it is." His expression became serious. "Mom, you don't have to." "I know." He did not take it immediately. That alone told me how much had changed. "What does this mean?" "It means you're welcome here." He swallowed. "And the property, still mine." A small smile appeared. "Understood." "And this key does not authorize rentals, investors, development plans, new locks, corporate retreats, or espresso machines." He laughed. "Definitely no espresso machines." I smiled too. Then I placed the key in his palm. "A key means you are welcome, Nathan." He closed his fingers around it. "It does not mean you own the door." His eyes filled. "I know." This time I believed him. Not because he said the right thing, because for months he had been living differently. Trust did not return in one conversation. It came back in small pieces. A canceled reservation, a returned key, an honest contract, a difficult debt payment, a question asked before a decision was made. I had spent years confusing forgiveness with removing consequences. Now I understood they were completely different. I could forgive Nathan while still protecting my land. I could love him without financing his ambition. I could welcome him into the cabin without handing him control of it. Before we left that afternoon, Nathan stopped beside the wooden family sign. He ran his fingers across the uneven letters he had carved with Thomas decades earlier. Dad really hated how crooked I made the R. He complained about it for 20 years. Nathan smiled. I'm glad you didn't replace it. So am I. We locked the cabin and walked toward the car. This time when Nathan handed the key back to me after checking the door, I shook my head. Keep it. He looked at me. Really, really. Then we drove down the mountain together. The land was still mine. The cabin was still filled with memories. And my son was still my son. But something important had changed. I no longer believed that protecting what belonged to me meant loving my children less. Sometimes the boundary is the very thing that gives love a chance to become healthy again. And sometimes the door you choose to open means more because everyone finally understands who has the right to unlock it. What happened to me taught me something I wish I had understood much earlier. Love without boundaries can slowly become permission. For years I believed being a good mother meant stepping in whenever my children were hurting. I thought love meant making the hard parts softer, fixing the mistakes, covering the gap, and keeping the family together at any cost. But sometimes when we rescue the people we love from every consequence, we do more than protect them from pain. We protect them from growth. Nathan did not become entitled overnight. That pattern grew slowly, one rescue at a time, and I had helped create it because saying yes felt kinder than saying no. But kindness and surrender are not the same thing. You can love someone deeply and still refuse to give them access to what they have not earned. You can forgive someone without immediately trusting them again. You can care about your children without sacrificing your retirement, your home, your peace, or the things you spent a lifetime building. And perhaps the hardest lesson is this: when someone becomes angry because you finally set a boundary, that does not automatically mean the boundary is wrong. Sometimes the people who benefited most from your silence are the ones most uncomfortable when you finally speak. My husband understood something I had struggled to accept. Nathan needed more than another rescue. He needed the chance to face the weight of his own choices. Watching that happen hurt me more than signing away my land ever would have. But pain is not always evidence that we are doing the wrong thing. Sometimes pain is what change feels like. In the end, I did forgive my son. But forgiveness did not mean pretending nothing happened. Trust returned slowly through actions, honesty, humility, and respect. That little cabin key eventually became more valuable than any inheritance because Nathan finally understood what it represented. Not ownership, permission, not entitlement, trust. And trust, unlike a lock, cannot simply be replaced overnight. If you were in my position, would you have signed that lease to save your child's business, or would you have done what I did and let him face the consequences? I'd truly love to hear your thoughts and personal experiences in the comments. And if this story touched you, reminded you of someone you love, or gave you something to think about, please subscribe to the channel and join us for more stories about family betrayal, forgiveness, boundaries, and second chances. Sometimes